Today I'm going to show you how to paint this abstract. I'm Lori Rivera, artist in Southern Indiana. Welcome to my channel. Okay, so the first thing I'm doing is toning the canvas panel, and all that is painting it a solid color. And one of the reasons I do this is so that none of the white canvas peeks through the final piece. I want to make sure all that white is covered up. And I got this color by mixing Phthalo blue, Cadmium yellow light, white, and Quinacridone Magenta. So it's kind of like a olive green color. So I'm covering the whole canvas panel with this green. You can get your paint to glide on a little easier too if you take a spray bottle and spray your canvas a little bit. Just mist it with water. Now I'm putting some green, some dark, kind of like an army green on here. At this stage, and I'm using my color shaper, my silicone rubber paintbrush for this. And at this stage, I'm really not concerned about composition or anything like that. I'm just trying to get some paint on the canvas. Yeah, I'm just trying to add some layers. At this stage, it's all about layering your colors. Okay, so now I'm adding some magenta with a little bit of white. I'm using a paintbrush, and this paintbrush I'm using is an old paintbrush. It's kind of like it's kind of hard and misshapen, and it's a good one to use for abstracts because it's not a brand new paintbrush. A lot of times it makes abstracts more interesting if you use the old hardened paintbrushes that, yeah, just old paintbrushes. You can use any paintbrush. It's going to be more interesting, like I said, if you use a paintbrush that's not new, if you use one that's all messed up. Now I'm adding some orange. That's kind of like orange, kind of like a light orange. I mixed cadmium yellow light, quinacridone magenta, and white to get this color. So I'm kind of just adding it different areas on the canvas. Just kind of adding it in different spots. Like I said, I'm not concerned about the composition at this point. Just worried about getting different layers on there. And notice how I'm putting the color all around the canvas. That's so that your eye moves all around the canvas. If you put a color in one spot, then your eye will get stuck in that one spot. But if you move the color into different spots, if you put it in different spots in the on the canvas, then your eye will move all around. And that's what you want. You want your eye to move all around the canvas. You don't want it to get stuck anywhere. So now I'm adding a stencil. And this is most of the stencil design. These designs are going to be mostly covered up in the end. This is just to add more interest. I think in the end, a little bit of this peeked through, but not a whole lot. I think I ended up covering up most of it. So now I'm taking another stencil and adding it to the canvas as well with white. I think this color had just a tiny bit of blue in it. It was mostly white. So I'm just kind of getting some of that design on there in different places. You know, it just adds interest, like I said. Just adds another layer of interest. And put some over here too. Now I'm adding straight quinacridone magenta right out of the bottle. I try to mix my colors when I can, but sometimes I will use them right out of the bottle as they are. So I'm putting this magenta all around the canvas. As you can see, just putting it in different spots. So yeah, I'm kind of covering up some of that stencil area. A lot of it ends up getting covered up. So I'm putting some magenta down at the bottom. And you'll see later on in the video, I flipped the canvas the other way. Something you should always do is, especially with abstracts, you can't do it so much with still lifes and things like that, of course, but with abstracts, you should turn your canvas all around different ways as you're painting it, because sometimes it looks better one way than it does the way you're painting it. Like I'm painting it this way now, but it might look better if I turn it upside down. So now I'm adding some lavender. This is Phthalo blue with Quinacridone Magenta and some white. Just trying to add it in different areas of the canvas, like I said, so you want your eye to move all around. So I'm putting this color in different places. I'm not just putting it in one area. I guess there's one exception to that rule. Sometimes I'll have a color that's nowhere else in the canvas, but I'll have it in the focal point. I think that's really one of the only times that works, when you have a certain color just in one area. If you have it in the focal point, I think you can get away with it. So now I'm adding some purple. This is Phthalo blue with magenta. I don't think I added any white to this. I think it's just Phthalo blue and magenta. See how dark it is? If you don't add any white, then you get a really, really deep purple. And oh, once again, this paintbrush I'm using is a hard paintbrush. It is hard and old. It doesn't have the nice soft bristles of a new paintbrush. It is just old, and it's perfect for abstracts. So don't throw away your paintbrushes. Always keep them, because even if they're not good for a still life or something like that, then you can still use them for abstracts. Now I'm adding some lighter color. This is light pink, magenta with white. And I'm kind of just putting shapes in here and blocking in color. Now I think what I did here was, I think I added acrylic glazing liquid. Yeah, I added acrylic glazing liquid to my brush with a little bit of that turquoise. And I'm just kind of going over the areas where the stencils are. So probably right around in this stage of the process, I am starting to think about where I want my focal point to be. And I ended up choosing to put it at the lower left, where all that white stencil, the little circles are. I ended up putting the focal point there. And now I am adding some green. This is Phthalo blue with some yellow and white. And I'm kind of just going over some of the areas of the canvas. Just adding another layer. And a lot of this green ends up being covered up anyway. But it still adds a layer of interest. Okay, so now I am blocking in a circle, an organic circle, and taking it off the edge on both sides. I got this color by mixing phthalo blue, magenta, and burnt sienna together. Now I'm putting some circles over on the right side. And these actually ended up being covered up. I decided I didn't like them. So now I'm taking that circle off the edge with some of that dark color and putting some definition into that line there. A lot of this doesn't even show through in the final piece. A lot of times when I paint abstracts, it's just a matter of playing with the canvas and the paints and trying to get something to look good. Many times, sometimes it takes longer to get to a good point of my abstracts than it does at other times. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes I get something done pretty quickly. It just depends on the day. But now I'm putting some, I don't know what you would call that color. Kind of a yellow-brown, I guess, in there. Putting that color in there. Putting it all around the canvas. I'm starting to actually like the way this looks just a little bit now. I know it's not done yet, but I'm starting to like the different layers and the textures. So I'm using my color shaper again, as you can see. Now I'm adding some white. Kind of just moving that paint around with that color shaper. I'm going over that circle at the top. Next, I'm adding some turquoise. Just adding different areas of color with the turquoise. Yeah, this is kind of right in the middle. The longer you create abstracts, the better you'll get at them. They're very, very hard at first. I still find them hard, honestly. It's the hardest kind of work that I do, my abstract pieces. They're harder than a still life piece could ever be. You know, they may not take as long, but they're harder, I think. So I'm just kind of putting this turquoise in here, getting it in different areas. And this is that old paintbrush that I'm using again. The one that's really old and hard and all the bristles are separated. It's just a really old paintbrush, but it works great for abstracts. I'm putting some of that turquoise up at the top. See how I'm covering up a lot of what I've done so far? That's what abstracts are all about. It's about adding and subtracting, adding and subtracting. You might add something here and take it out over there, and so I decided to turn it over. And this is where I feel like my composition started to take shape once I turned it over and started doing all this. So I added some white. That's almost pure white. It's not quite pure white, but it's almost. Putting different areas of white in there. I'm using my color shaper again. Spreading that out. Kind of spreading out that white in there. I'm starting to like it now. At this stage, I was starting to like my piece. I knew it wasn't done, but I was starting to like it. So I'm putting some little lines in there. Taking it all the way down the canvas, these lines. I'm adding some red, magenta. Adding some color back in there. This is my focal point that I'm working on right now. Spreading some of that around. And something that I need to mention too is that hard edges are good to use in your focal point, but it's not really, it doesn't do you much good to put hard edges in your non-focal point areas. You want, I'm not saying you can't have hard edges in your non-focal point areas, but typically your hardest edges will be in your focal point, and your softer edges will be in the background in your non-focal point areas. So I'm adding some orange and yellow. This is kind of like a bright yellow that I'm adding. I mixed Quinacridone Magenta and Cadmium Yellow Light to get this color. Putting a little bit in there where the lines are. My focal point is starting to take shape. And there's kind of like a secondary focal point down at the bottom left where those little yellow spots are. That's kind of like my secondary focal point. I'm really liking it at this stage. I think it's starting to look pretty good. Now you want your darkest darks and your lightest lights to be in your focal point. So that's why I'm going back and adding some dark colors in my focal point, because I had kind of lost all my dark spots. Adding some dark over here too. Yeah, just getting those dark spots back in there so I can have my darkest dark and my lightest light be in the focal point. Doing some brush work with that color shaper. And I'm pulling some of that red down here where the lines are. Trying to add more interest. I got some white in there to make it even lighter. Adding some white up there. Now here's my lightest light. Remember, you need your lightest light to be in the focal point. And your darkest dark. So I'm just kind of, at this stage, I'm just kind of playing around with the paint, trying to get it the way I want it. And at this point too, I'm noticing that I have bright colors all across the canvas. So at some point I'm going to have to tone down the background a little bit, which I'm doing now. I'm trying to neutralize that background so that my colors in the focal point will pop more. So I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but colors always look brighter when they're placed against neutral colors. So like if you want your bright colors to look bright, put them right next to neutral colors, and that'll really brighten them up and bring them out. So I'm just kind of neutralizing this background a little bit. It looks a little bit pink, actually. It doesn't really look as neutral as I would have liked to get it, but it still looks okay. And one thing that I would have done differently with this piece is see that up in the top left, how there's that light color and then there's that line of red underneath there, that harsh, hard edge line. I ended up leaving that in the final composition, and I actually think I'm going to go back and take that out. Take out that hard edge. So I'm going to soften that up later. Because I kind of think it just, your eye is drawn down there to that hard edge, and it just doesn't, it doesn't read well. So I'm putting some of my lines back in there. And now I'm adding some turquoise in between those lines, because I felt like it needed some more color right there. I almost neutralized too much of that area. So now I'm adding some color back in. I'm actually adding like a dark blue at the bottom of those lines. Now I'm going into my focal point and adding more color there, more of that turquoise color. More turquoise on the edge. I'm pretty happy with it at this point. Okay, adding some more lines. I made those lines go off the edge of the bottom, or the left side, I mean. So there it is, it's all done. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so. I release a new video every Friday, sometimes even more than that. And if you like this video, be sure and give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment. Thanks for watching.